Welcome everyone to tonight's Selectmen's meeting of August 25th, 2020. I call the meeting to order. Tonight's meeting is being broadcast live and taped by Norwood Community Media. We'll begin the meeting tonight in our typical fashion of saluting the flag and a moment of silent reflection. I just call many members of the community's attention to passing of Peter Wall. Peter was the baseball coach at Norwood High for 35 years, a postman, related to two other famous Norwood individuals. His brothers who passed before him all left quite a mark on the community, and we express our condolences to all his family. With that, we'll salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So tonight we're going to start with a meeting with Mr. Mark Ryan, Director of Public Works and our town engineer. A couple meetings ago, we had received the letter after that rainstorm, that horrible rainstorm, from Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan down on Allen Road, called our attention to serious drainage problems. Not that we needed their letter after that storm, but it kind of focused on a previous study the town had done and plans the town had made, referred to as the Meadowbrook Drainage Study. I thought we would ask Mr. Ryan to come in, get copies of the studies for everyone so that everyone could be brought up to date. Some of the members are newer and might not have a lot of detail on that. So we'll have a brief discussion tonight. And anyone who has any questions or suggestions going forward, we can entertain all of that. So we'll start the discussion with Mr. Ryan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, members of the board, General Manager Mizuko. Thank you for having me. Yes, as the chairman's talked about the events of June 28th, the incredible storm we had. It was quite an eye-opener for a lot of people throughout the town that, maybe we should start looking at our drainage system a little bit closer. We know about the flooding in many houses. We know about the flooding in the downtown, particularly Central Street at East Vernon, Manhattan Street at the bridge, in front of the police and fire station. Numerous homes, and basically any low point in the road was simply overwhelmed. Overwhelmed, Mr. Chairman, by a storm that no drainage system in the Commonwealth and probably most of the East Coast would be designed to handle. You all have in front of you the drainage study, the Meadowbrook drainage study that was performed in 2004. This study, Mr. Chairman, was the result after the 1998 storm event that flooded the Norwood Police and Fire Station and ultimately led to the new police and fire station. During that event, in June of 1998, we had nearly 6 inches of water fall in 24 hours. June of 2020, June 28th of 2020, we had nearly 5 inches, well over 4.5. Some records are saying closer to 5 inches in 90 minutes. So there's no system, Mr. Chairman, that could handle that. But regardless, it's something we should start looking into, seeing what upgrades we can make to the drainage system. And Norwood has not been standing idly by. We've invested a lot of money, not only in this report, but actual infrastructure improvements. The Sumner Street culvert was wiped out in 1998. We went through a grant process in town funds and replaced that with a 4x8 culvert. Winter Street at the Westwood Town line with Norwood was consistently flooding out. We replaced that. We remember the Deerfield Road at the bottom of Deerfield Road, number 51 and 53, would flood out during a storm event, and we invested over $100,000 to upgrade the system, putting in twin 30-inch drain pipes. So Norwood has been doing its part, and we've been pretty fortunate up until this storm event. And as I said, that storm event, June 28th, no design could handle that. You know, most of our drainage pipes systems are designed for a 10-year storm, 4.6 inches in 24 hours. We received that, if not more, than in 90 minutes. So if that event came, again, our systems couldn't handle it, but we can do better. So back in 2004, when this study was presented to the board, there was many recommendations, starting at the Meadowbrook, which is just east of Pleasant Street, in Murphy Field or Pleasant Ball Field, working its way up to Murphy Field and then heading to Norwood Center. And the reason was a couple of reasons: to help the police and fire station, and also to alleviate the flooding under the Manhattan Street Bridge, Central Street at East Vernon, and other places in Norwood Center. In 2004, Mr. Chairman, all that work, if we invested the necessary monies in 2004 to upgrade it, we're talking $4.3 million, which was quite a bit of money, thinking of the times. And, you know, was it worth that kind of money? We rebuilt the police and fire station. We made some improvements there, and that pretty much alleviated a lot of the flooding, at least with the police and fire station area. So I think we all got a little comfortable, myself included, with results of that work. And now we're faced with that scenario back in 2020. So that $4.3 million project in 2004, you know, if you consider a modest 5% increase in construction costs, is probably closer to 10 to 11 million right now, Mr. Chairman. So there are lots of bits and pieces to this project. The Meadowbrook I'm talking about in particular. There are phases that are involved. You start at the low end of the project, which will be at the Meadowbrook, and work your way up. We had on our capital outlay plan as recent as 2017 to do a couple of those projects. But the interest didn't seem to be there because we've been very fortunate with a lot of the rainstorms that we experienced, and some of the work that we implemented made us feel comfortable with where we stood. So now we're at this point, and I think we got to start reconsidering some of the recommendations in the Meadowbrook drainage report, be it take it at its worth right now or invest in a consultant to update it. And I'm not talking about just the Meadowbrook, I'm talking about town-wide as well. There are a number of areas that were flooded out. There are a number of areas that improvements should be looked at. And I think we got to start really seriously considering a master plan for our drainage system. We do it for our water system. We've been doing it for our sewer system. And we really got to start thinking about our storm water system to serve the community better, to comply with EPA and state requirements. I think we really got to start looking at a long-term plan, not just a project here or there. We've got to really develop a long-term master plan to alleviate a lot of the flooding that we're probably going to see going forward, because the storm events we're seeing now are pretty serious compared to what we experienced in the past.
Thank you. Before I open it up, let me ask a couple of questions, if I may. You referenced capital plan and putting some money in for some incremental improvements in the system, the Meadowbrook system. That was in the Department of Public Works capital plan. I'm not sure that it's been able to make its way to the town-wide capital plan, at least priority-wise, because as you mentioned, we haven't really been suffering problems. But in your view, if we were to do anything on a more global, more town-wide, study-wise, would you be recommending that we still go forward with these and make these a little more of a priority and try to get them done? Or would you suggest that they should be held? Can they be done separate from the long-term study?
So the two recommendations we had on the Public Works capital plan, Mr. Chairman, could be separate from everything else. They're at the low point of the quote-unquote Meadowbrook system, which is 1.5 square miles of the most densely populated part of town. And I really think we need to start reconsidering those two projects. Basically improve the Meadowbrook channel from approximately 6th Street to the head wall, which is just east of Pleasant Street, and then talk about installing a culvert from the head wall at Meadowbrook to Murphy Field. This would at least handle the water that's coming down from what, if you look in the report of 2004, the north and south feeder, which is all the densely populated area upstream of Meadowbrook.
Thank you. Anyone have questions, comments at this point? Mr. Maloney?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Ryan, I did read the report today. I don't know why I was possessed by a desire to interesting stuff. The north and south feeders now, though, the water comes down there, and does it come out of Brook now?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the end of that.
We're talking about making an improvement that would connect Meadowbrook to the north and south feeder, to putting in nodes down at Murphy Field on the other side of Pleasant Street. What happens now when the water comes down? Because we did get a letter from somebody, was it Allen Street, Mr. Chairman, at the bottom there?
Yes.
What happens now? How will that be improved by this recommended improvement?
So yes, so the letter you received, and I saw a resident on Allen Road across from Murphy Field witness firsthand what happens with the north-south feeder connect in Murphy Field. And that's a junction that is just, it's over capacity, and the water just shoots out, the manhole cover gets blown off. It's quite a scene, and probably very terrifying for any of the residents around there. So from that manhole, Mr. Maloney, that where the north and south feeder connect, my recommendation is for the two projects just downstream from that would not eliminate during an event like June 28, 2020, but 95% of the storms, it would handle the water, wouldn't cause that extreme case of manhole covers blowing off and flooding of Murphy Field, and allow the water to go where it's supposed to go, and that's the Meadowbrook and then eventually in the Ponce River.
Okay, all right. So there are a couple of other things that were mentioned in the report. One is it sounds fairly easy too, which is sort of clearing out and cleaning and sort of attending to Meadowbrook proper as well. I guess it tends to gather silt, so it's something we can do. That sounds fairly easy. But the other concern was the Ponce River Watershed Association was concerned about the amount of water that would flow into the river. Is that part of our calculation here as well?
So at a minimum, anything above Murphy Field, if we start increasing the pipe sizes from Murphy Field towards Norwood Center, the Ponce River watershed would get involved. They would look for some mitigation, be it some kind of detention basin. And in the report, they talked about one at Hennessy Field. They talked about one underground at Murphy Field. So absolutely above that area on Murphy Field, the Ponce River watershed would get involved. From Murphy Field down to the Meadowbrook is still a question if they would get involved, but there's certainly going to be a player in all of this.
Okay, so it did seem, though, that in the report, and this is my last question, Mr. Chairman, that if we, as part of this, if we did establish the retention basin and then the underground tank at Murphy Field, we would be able to mitigate the flow enough and yet still solve or help to solve the problem. That's the idea here, right?
That would be the ultimate. The Hennessy Field is a lot more cost effective because it would be an open area detention basin like you see in most subdivisions. The one at Murphy Field would be underground, which is extremely costly.
Yeah.
So this is something we've got to look at long term. What, the cost benefit analysis is what you're going to end up doing.
All right. Well, it sounds pretty good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Ryan.
Thank you. Mr. Donahue?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Ryan, what size are the pipes that the feeders, the north and south feeders are? What size are those pipes, please?
So you've got a combination of 48-inch pipes coming down from.
Those are big.
They're large pipes. They're very large pipes, but it's a very large, dense area. Not a lot of. We got a 54-inch coming down through Hennessy Field, and then a 48 coming through from Hillside Ave. So 54-inch coming from the center, and then that's the north feeder, and then a 48-inch is the southern feeder. So they're two large
So
pipes.
are those some of the largest we have in our whole town?
They're pretty large. I mean, we've got, box culverts that are 4x8, but these are pretty large pipes, Mrs. Donahue, and to alleviate that, those two pipes, you can consider a 54-inch and a 48-inch pipe are coming in and being relieved by a 54-inch pipe. So right there, you can tell that it's, it's
Doesn't
a
work.
recipe for disaster. So, the proposal is to install a twin pipe next to that, a 5x7 culvert next to that existing 54-inch to handle the north and south feeder.
So would all of the flow be enough by gravity? We wouldn't need any pumps anywhere, would we?
We would not. It would be all gravity, yes.
That's a savings.
Absolutely.
And your idea about at Hennessy Field, that would be a huge savings too, above ground. And it could be done tastefully and tied into some recreation use as opposed to tearing out the ball field and all that, in the future.
Aesthetically, it's a good idea. Money wise, it's extremely expensive. So you'd have to look at it. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Mr. John, I see your hand, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mark, I was fascinated reading through this report. A lot of excellent details about what we could do as a town. But of the entire report, have we done anything since 2004?
We've done simple maintenance that they recommended.
But no structural actual upgrades.
The only structural I would say, and that was when we did the police and fire station, we extended the 4x8 culvert from the then Star Market, now Shaw's Plaza, to the detention basin behind the police and fire station, which, shocked us all how well that functioned after it was put in.
Yeah, I remember that. That was a good project.
Yes. But other than that, Mr. Ajad, no, we have not.
is there any concern about, because this study is 16 years old, that any design changes may have occurred over the time period because we seem to have gotten into a cycle of worsening weather issues over the years that would cause, I know we'd have to update this, but increase pipe sizes that were recommended in 2004, or the box culverts that were recommended in 2004, stuff like that. We're concerned that the scope would actually increase if we go to the full design.
I think if, hopefully the recommendation is, consulting with someone. And I think the results are just to what you said, Mr. Jha, that you're probably going to see some increase in pipe sizes because things have changed quite a bit since 2004 with the intensity of these events. It's been pretty remarkable the last few years. So yes, we'd have to revisit this, but a lot of work's been done, so that's a good thing. So
Right, I agree. So updating is, someone's gonna have to take a hard look and review, and then upgrade is necessary. And then obviously the cost estimates are gonna be severely increased because they're 16-year-old numbers. But in my mind, and I know my colleagues that have spoken have all agreed that we have to start. We can't hope that our luck just continues, or that these only come, once every 20 to 25 years. I know we only design for 10-year storms, but I really think we need to make a commitment to the residents of this town that we are going to fix some of the infrastructure issues we have regarding the drainage. I compliment you on, right, we have taken the water issue and the sewer issue and have been dealing with that long-term, and the issues are getting better. So, I mean, they're being solved, the issues are being solved, and we're moving forward in a positive manner. We need to do the same thing for the drainage system. And first things first is you have to have this updated, but I think we have to have the commitment to say we're going to implement it over a series number of years and come up with a way of funding it, because I think it's expected of us now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Lang.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate this. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how this study might have informed the vulnerability report that was produced a few years ago, and if the findings are consistent.
I'm not sure that report you're talking about, Mr. Lane, took into account what the results of this were. I'm really not sure of that, but it's this is a important watershed area that really has to be looked at. I really don't know the answer to your question on that, but this is a densely populated area, vulnerable. You need to address it. I agree.
Yeah, that's great. And then one additional question, Mr. Ryan. Could you explain a little bit about this part of the study was a little bit foreign to me, so I'm just trying to understand a little bit better on the restoring the wetland and the infeasibility of doing that. I think the report says there were several sites, but they were all deemed that it wasn't possible. I was wondering if you could just expand on that a little bit.
So yes, the environmental part of it, we can design the right size pipes. We can get the water out of there, but there are certain requirements by the EPA and DEP on rates of flow. And you talk about detention basins to not overwhelm everything downstream. It's easy to send everything downstream. At this day and age, we try to reduce the rate of runoff downstream so we don't overwhelm any neighbors or neighborhoods downstream. So you got to take certain mitigation measures. But there are also, with Hennessy Field, there was some wetland impacts if we built a detention basin there, and you have to replicate that somewhere. And DEP and EPA look for that replication to happen within the same watershed or basically within Norwood. So it's a very complex environmental permitting process. We've done it before with the town. We did it when the light department did their replacement of the transmission lines. We ended up buying the Walker property off of University Ave to protect wetlands, and between protecting wetlands and replicating them, this will be all part of the equation when we get to this project full blown.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Anything else? If not, I'd like to maybe recommend, maybe Mr. Jha, based on your comments, maybe we should show our commitment to further looking into this problem and what we can do about it by supporting the continued inclusion in the capital plan for the Meadowbrook drainage, two-part Meadowbrook drainage repairs or improvements that Mr. Ryan has recommended, and ask the manager and Mr. Ryan to put their heads together and come back in the future with recommendations as to the best course of action for us to take. We're probably going to end up with consultants involved here somewhere, but basically how we're going to study this matter and how we're going to move it forward. Would you like
So moved.
anything on that motion? Not, we'll vote. Mr. Hajar? Mrs. Donahue?
Yes.
Mr. Maloney?
Aye.
Mr. Lang?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. That's unanimous. Mr. Ryan, Mr. Mizuko, you have your marching orders on this matter, please?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
Was
Mr.
it
Ryan.
there is an item on the agenda. I sent a memo to General Manager Mizuko regarding sort of follow-up, drainage. A resident of
Hold on one minute, Mr. Ryan, just for the members so they catch up on our agenda. He's speaking about item 10A.
Thank you. So the item on the agenda, 10A, we have a resident on Robin Wood Road that experienced severe flooding. They're at a low point in the road, and as we all know, most of the roads that had a low point flooded out. So we want to do a trial, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, to do a trial with sandbags, reducing the width of Robin Wood Road at Wedgewood Road to kind of direct the flow away from this property and direct it to the area that it's supposed to go to, which is on Deerfield Road, where we put in a few years ago twin 30-inch pipes in addition to an existing 30-inch pipe. So we'd like to trial it, see how successful we are. If it works out, ultimately we would put in some kind of curbing, probably bituminous berm, and narrow the intersection and help out the neighborhood in that way.
Motion to approve.
Mr. Hajar?
Second.
Second, just a question, a question for Mr. Ryan.
Yes, go right
So
ahead.
Mark, based on the diagram, I drove up there earlier today just to look. I mean, Wedgewood Drive is pretty steep going downhill. And Robin Hood Road, it does have a low part, but it's pretty flat through there. It looks like you're trying to divert the water from coming off of Wedgewood Drive onto Robin Hood Road by extending that curb line somehow, at least on the trial with the sandbags, so that it can continues going down Wedgewood Drive? Is that correct? Your goal?
Yes.
Okay. And so at the end of Wedgewood Drive, we're okay? I mean, if we're gonna divert more water off of Robin Hood Road down Wedgewood Drive, is there any concern at the end of Wedgewood Drive?
So on Robin Wood Road is a 10-inch pipe that's laid at the minimum slope. That pipe doesn't carry very much water. At the end of Wedgewood at Deerfield, we've got twin 30-inch pipes right at the beginning, and then a little further down, we have another 30-inch pipe. So there's adequate capacity down there. But we're going to watch it too, so the job. But we feel confident that downstream pipes are sized right, because when we did that Deerfield Road project years ago,
Yep.
that was expecting the flow from Wedgewood Drive to come to Deerfield and not go to Robinwood. So we
Okay,
feel
good.
confident that will be adequate.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions? We have a motion then. We'll take a vote to approve the request recommendation for a trial from Mr. Ryan. Mr. Ja?
Aye.
Mrs. Donahue?
Aye.
Mr. Maloney?
Aye.
Mr. Lang?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. That's unanimous vote. Thank you, Mr. Ryan. I think we can let you go. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank
Good
you,
Thank
Mark.
you, Mark.
All
Good
right.
night.
First item of new business, we've been notified by Olivati's Restaurant that they have closed their business permanently as of June 23rd, 2020. I'd recommend that we have a show cause hearing and find out what their future plans are for a lack of use of the license.
So moved,
Motion to
Mr. Chairman.
close hearing.
So moved.
Anything further? Saying none, we'll vote. Mr. Ja?
Aye.
Mrs. Donahue?
Aye.
Mr. Maloney?
Aye.
Mr. Lane?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, so that's unanimous. Thank you. Item number 2, the Metropolitan Area Planning Council reappointments. Our current members, which we'd like to have considered for reappointment, Mr. Thomas O'Rourke and Mr. Town Planner Paul Halkiotis as our alternate. Have a motion on that? Or any
So
other?
moved.
Seconded.
Second.
And second, anything further? That will vote. Mr. Ja?
Aye.
Mrs. Donahue?
Aye.
Mr. Maloney?
Aye.
Mr. Lane?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, so those appointments are unanimous. Number 3, Comcast has submitted a statement submitting their latest quarterly franchise fee and payment made directly to NCM in the amount of $47,223.20 for our contract agreements.
Motion to file.
All in favor? Mrs. Donahue?
Aye.
Aye. Mr. Maloney?
Aye.
Mr. Ja?
Aye.
Mr. Lane?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. That's unanimous as well. Verizon is submitting a notification for payments again to NCM in the amount of $54,889.08 for the quarterly PEG access, again, in accordance with the terms of their contract with the community. Information to file again.
So moved.
Saying nothing, we'll vote. Mr. Ja?
Aye.
Mrs. Donahue?
Aye.
Mr. Maloney?
Aye.
Mr. Lane?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Item 6 on the new business is notification from the
Mr. Chairman, you
Division of
skipped
Capital
over
Asset.
number 4. Mr. Chairman, you skipped over number 4.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Ja. We also got a similar payment from the Norwood Lake Department. They paid Norwood Community Media an advertising fee in the amount of $42,790 and equipment facilities funding in the amount of $15,000, again, per terms of their contract. Information to file.
Motion to file.
So moved.
Mr. Ja?
Aye.
Mrs. Donahue?
Aye.
Ms. Maloney?
Aye.
Mr. Lane?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. That's unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Ja. So number 6, the Division of Capital Asset Management.
Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt. I had a little trouble hearing. Did we get number 5? We did that.
Yes,
Viola Babula?
yes, we got her.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So now we've got notification from the Division of Capital Asset Management, that they are looking to lease property for the state police in this area. If there's any properties town owns or otherwise we know that might be interesting in bidding on this property or bidding for this contract with the state. They're basically looking for 2,200 square feet of secure storage space. So is that Mrs. Donahue?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Mizuko, have you let them know about the space that we have?
We've taken a look at this. We don't feel we have any excess space we could lease the state. We're still trying to find enough space for all of our operations. They need something along the lines of warehouse space to store state police equipment. We're relatively limited in that regard.
What about the old light department building
So
on
we're
the
planning
top floor?
the top floor. They want, they want a single floor storage area. They're looking at equipment. They need a warehouse like space. We don't have 2,200 square feet space available.
What about on Lennox Street,
We would
in
have
that garage that we have?
we would have to find the equipment we store there somewhere else for that to go.
Thank you.
Okay, so information to file then. All in favor, Mr. Hajar,
Aye.
Mr. Donahue,
Aye.
Mr. Maloney,
Aye.
Mr. Lane,
Aye.
chair votes aye. That's unanimous. Shella Canelli, our library director, submitting notification that the Board of Library Trustees has elected Mr. John Hall as the chairman and Marguerite Cummins as vice chairman, and that happened at their June 9th meeting. That's information. All in favor? Mr. Hajar,
Aye.
Mrs. Donahue,
Aye.
Mr. Maloney,
Aye.
and Mr. Lane.
Aye.
Chair also votes aye, that's unanimous. Now I have a request from Zena Najjar, Norwood resident, submitting request to hold a car wash in the municipal parking lot behind the theater, Saturday, September 5th, 2020, to raise funds for the Lebanese Red Cross in support of the victims of the bombing in Lebanon.
Motion to approve?
Is there a second?
Second.
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 Anything further? Seeing none, we'll take a vote. Mr. Hajar,
Aye.
Mrs. Donahue,
Aye.
Mr. Maloney,
Aye.
Mr. Lane,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye, so that is unanimous. I will move on to the next item, and town treasurer, tax collector submitting for approval, signature of the board, the sale of $29,600 worth of water bonds for the town dated August 31st, 2020 to the Massachusetts Water Resource Authority, and each member of the Board of Selectmen, Town Council, and Town Treasurer be and hereby are authorized to take any and all actions and execute and deliver such certificates, receipts, or other documents as may be determined by them or any of them to be necessary or convenient to carry into effect the provisions of the foregoing vote. That's the language he's looking for us to pass. Is there any comments or questions on this matter? If not,
Motion to,
someone make the motion as recommended by the treasurer.
motion to approve and sign as recommended by the treasurer.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, Mr. Hajar,
Aye.
Mrs. Donahue,
Aye.
Mr. Maloney,
Aye.
and Mr. Lane.
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Item 10A, we just took care of with Mr. Ryan before he left us. So 10B is submitting for adjustments in the senior work tax off program. Mr. Mizuko, would you like to explain your position here?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have reviewed the income limits and total dollar amount available for the senior tax work-off program here in Norwood, and we're recommending changes to that program. As you know, we offer a senior tax work-off program, and we haven't adjusted the actual income limits for quite a while, so we're finding it difficult to recruit seniors who meet the income limits. So we're looking to adjust those up. We've provided the board with some comparables. This would allow more seniors to be able to participate in the program. So it's an increase in both the amount of the, no, sorry, not the amount of the exemption. It's a chance for more seniors to income qualify, but also more seniors to be available. This money comes out of the town's overlay, which is what we put up for abatements and allowances. We did increase that last year to account for this, as well as other abatements that we may look at offering at the town meeting in the fall. So we recommend that the board approve it as presented, and this would allow more seniors to participate in the program. We find when we do have seniors participating in the program, it's a great success. And specific credit goes to Lorraine Hemway, who works in the HR office, who started off working for us on this project, as a senior tax work-off employee or participant, and we later hired her into a position in the part-time position in the HR office, and she did the work on this memo for us. Kudos to her for that.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, motions? Mr. Hajar?
Yes, Tony, thank you for this information. I know a lot of individuals, especially the seniors, were looking to see what we were going to do to try to make it available to more individuals that would enable them to work off some of their tax rolls. Just out of curiosity, any of the other clauses or Mass General laws in the 41 series and a couple in the 50 series that would, I'm sorry, not in the 50 series, the 41 series that would apply?
To this, no, other than last year, we did adopt the local option that allows somebody to work for a senior if that senior is disabled and physically unable to work. So if you're a senior in your home and you qualify for your physical ability, it's run through the HR department, but it's just a doctor's note, and somebody can actually perform the work for you to receive that abatement. So for this program, I believe we're maxed out. There are towns that do their senior work-off programs a little bit differently. We're still following under the state statutory program. Some towns do their own local program with a direct appropriation out of the budget, but that tends to be in the higher income communities.
And I also have to compliment Lorraine Hamway, known her for a long, long time. I know when I was on the personnel board, she was working senior tax off in that department, HR department. She is a very, very good person. I'm glad that she made the jump to part-time. Definitely well worth it. So good choice. And I support this. I'd like to make the motion that we adopt as written by the manager.
A second?
Second.
Anything on the motion? Further questions, comments? Then we'll put it to a vote. Mr. Hajar?
Aye.
Mrs. Donahue?
Aye.
Mr. Maloney?
Aye.
Mr. Lang?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, so that's unanimous. Item 11, under new business, Patricia Oginski of Casey Street submitting a request to close Casey Street from number 68 to number 86 on September 26, 2020, between 4 p.m. and 10 p.m. to hold a block party for 25 to 40 people. She is advising us that she's aware of and intending to take all necessary distancing protocols during this COVID period. Any comments?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second? Any further? Mr. Hajar?
Aye.
Mrs. Donahue?
Aye.
Mr. Maloney?
Aye.
Mr. Lang?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. So that's unanimously approved. We'll notify the police and fire as usual. Chief William Brooks, third. So now the police department has submitted his monthly report for July 1 through July 31, 2020. Information to file. Mr. Hajar?
Yes, I just wanted to, a couple items in the report that, in the chief's usual, very informative monthly report. So I thank him publicly. I do want to congratulate the 3 officers that have completed their academy requirements. They've graduated. Now they're in the field training for the 8 to 12 weeks. And if it's okay to mention their names, Mr. Chairman, Matt Ivory, Thomas George, and Ryan Sinclair, all really good individuals. I'm glad to see they made it through. And I'm sure there'll be wonderful officers in the town, and we can only offer that they stay safe. Also want to compliment the chief, as I like to do each month, about the training that goes on. You know, there's a lot going on in America today regarding police officers. So I'm glad to see the great training that is identified, a lot of hours. And year-to-date, 2,725 training hours. That's a lot. And we need to keep that up. That's great. So, Tony, if you could let the chief know that it's appreciated, and I know he's on top of these things, and that's great. We have a wonderful, both chiefs are wonderful in the public safety. And lastly, the issue about the speeding and the traffic study regarding Walpole Street and Beach Street, since this report is dated for the month of July, do we know if that study has been done?
I'd have to take a look.
Okay,
I know the traffic safety committee met today to go over a couple of issues, so I'll have to take a look.
okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mrs. Donahue?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the police report, I don't know, the numbers are so different. Into the arrests and complaints, calls for service in 2018, there were about 29,000 ballpark 800 calls. Then that was 18. Then in 19, about 6,000 more. In this year to date is almost half. And I wonder, is that, where does that come from? Is that from the virus? More
So
people just staying?
We average, so we're actually seeing higher numbers now than we were earlier in the year. We average anywhere between, I'd say, 80 and 100 police calls per day. And at the peak of COVID, if you will, we saw that number drop to sometimes right around 30. Now we're solidly hitting, in the summer, sometimes a little bit busier. It's not uncommon to hit 100, 110 a day. So we saw our numbers dip for a while, well below average, probably a third of what we normally saw. Now we're seeing about 20% above average. So we expect that likely to continue in the future, but we saw that COVID sort of dip and then spike back up.
So in 18, arrests and complaints, X, 19 about the same, 20 so far, about 1/3,
We saw a huge drop in
all
COVID.
because of the virus?
People, there was a period there for probably a good 60 days. People were staying in their homes. I mean, there were next to no traffic stops. If you remember, downtown looked like a ghost town. You could leave in the morning and you saw nobody leaving the house. I mean, we saw our calls go way, way down. Ambulance calls, fire calls, everything sort of crashed through, but now we're seeing slightly higher than normal as society begins to normalize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Anything further? Seeing none, I'll accept the motion to accept the chief's report with thanks. All
So
in
moved.
favor?
So moved.
Thank you. Mr. Hajar?
Aye.
Mrs. Donahue?
Aye.
Mr. Maloney?
All right.
Mr. Lane?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. That's again unanimous. Number 13 is another monthly report from Superintendent of Recreation, Travis Fowley. Actually, 2 months. This report covers July and August of 2020. Mr. Hajar.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Manager, the only question I have is on the Lower Ball CPC project. Any reason why it can't be done this fall rather than waiting till next spring?
I do know there was some delay there due to the storm caused some trees to get uprooted and a little bit of other damage. But we can see if we can push it up in the portfolio. What we sort of saw is a lot of things kind of went by the wayside during COVID. And now we're playing catch up and trying to ram in as much as we can in a short period of time. But we can certainly see if we can speed that project up.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Maloney, did I see your hand, sir?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, though I think Mr. Lane was going to address the same matter. Feasibility study, I will defer to him.
Oh, no, I knew you were going to say that, Tom. So you can have it. I was just going to make note that just give some kudos to Mr. Farley, because I really do think, especially with his seasonal staff, that they've done a great job this summer, all things considered. And with the pool being open, I think that's been a real asset and being able to make that work. So I just wanted to publicly say that I'm really impressed with the job they've done.
Thank you. Does that get us back to you, Mr. Maloney?
Just to get a quick update that Mr. Lane and I are on the pool feasibility study subcommittee, and we had a meeting last night from 6 to 6:30. We do plan to come forward to town meeting with a CPC request for about $80,000, $75,000 to $80,000 to do a feasibility study of the population, and more details to follow. Thank you.
Very nice.
All right, so that's, we need a motion then to accept the reports as submitted by Mr. All in
Second.
favor? Mr. Najjar?
Aye.
Mrs. Donahue?
Yes, aye.
Mr. Maloney?
Aye.
Mr. Lane?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, the reports are accepted. Under unfinished business, I've got listed here the establishment of an open space and recreation implementation committee. Remember that Mr. Halkiotis was before us and presented the open space master plan update. And he mentioned verbally that he thought we should have a committee to follow through implementation. Mr. Najjar had followed through on that, had some conversations with him about that. We met and talked a little bit about maybe what the committee makeup might be. And I asked him to put something together and submit it just so it would be on the agenda to discuss. I've also since then been approached by other thoughts of doing this a little more in-house than setting up a committee through administrative staff, which also has, in my opinion, some merit. So let's have a discussion and decide what, if anything, we're going to do with implementing follow through on the open space and recreation master plan. Mr. Najjar, why don't you start, sir?
Sure. So after Mr. Halkiotis and Patrick presented their plan, I read through it again and did request in writing that an implementation committee be set up, which we didn't have the last plan in 2010. And I followed that up with a conversation with him by telephone late last week, where we talked about potential members for the board to consider. And after talking to the chairman again late last week, we sort of outlined what we thought based on an odd number of 5, who we thought could play a good role in moving forward. Now, you know, the intent here is not to create an organization that has any power. It really is, we have a plan in front of us. There is no prioritization in that plan. It outlines several really good projects that we should consider. And the task of the committee would be to come back to this board, develop a prioritization list, identify funding, how we could do this over a number of years so that the 7-year plan doesn't become stale. And then every once in a while, come back to the board, just give them an update of what's going on, because we're certainly not going to be the day-to-day folks. It's going to be to other departments. And so what you have outlined as far as potential committee members is what you see. It's a group of 5 individuals. I have spoken to a couple that I thought might be considered for at-large members, but that is for the board to decide, and I can certainly give you their names in consideration. But I thought we would follow up based on what Mr. Halkiotis put in writing, and then what he told me in a telephone conversation and an email that he wrote regarding individuals or positions that should be considered, keeping it small and just keep this thing moving forward.
Mrs. Donahue?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I support entirely what Mr. Najjar has said, and I'd like to ask the board if you would even be kind enough to maybe think about taking it a step further. Instead of 5 members, having 7 members, it's my sincere belief that the more citizen input that we can have is very, very important. This is about the town of Norwood. This is about the citizens of the town of Norwood. The way that the committee is existing now, 2 people are on the town government payroll, and we have 3 people who are citizens. This is a very good thing. If we had 5 people who were citizens, that would be good too. The more ideas, the better, and I don't think that 7 is too large of a committee. It's a great idea to have, and I think we should implement it, and maybe think about 7 people, please.
Okay, anyone else? Mr. Maloney?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll tell you, I think it might be wiser to do what you call the in-house approach on this. I did read the open space plan. I liked it a lot, and I said so. This one provision, however, I think might be extraneous and unnecessary. Look, why don't we do this? I mean, if we need a committee in the future, we can always put one together. But compared to a decade ago when the last plan came out, instead of having one full-time person in planning and community development, we now have 3. And we have a brand new conservation person. I'd like to see what they could do. I much prefer seeing the paid staff pursue these kinds of things. In addition to that, I mean, we do have some citizen boards already at work on land use types of things. Now we have a newly reconstituted Conservation Commission, which I think is going to do an excellent job. Sustainability Committee, Trails Committee, Planning Board. I think that we should be the implementation committee insofar as one is needed. That is to say, the Board of Selectmen, and rely on the paid staff under the direction of Mr. Bazzucco, Mr. Akiotis, to present any formal proposals for purchases or a renovation of existing property that we own. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Lane?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a couple questions. I'm not sure if these can be answered, but just in reading the original report, which I was very impressed with also, I was wondering if it's standard practice for towns to implement a committee to sort of move it forward, or is it sort of a mix? Do we have any kind of indication?
So it is a mix, but here's the thing: you're creating a committee with no authority to move a plan forward for that has to go through a number of other committees. The selectmen is sort of the policy body of the town. You make what decisions you want the staff to follow. So if the selectmen decide this is a priority, you're going to get proposals for the budget process, for the capital planning process. They're going to put these proposals up there. You know, Mr. Halkiotis' fear, and he's right, is that we come up with these plans, and what happens is they get put on a shelf. Well, they get put on a shelf because there's no interest in them. If the selectmen are saying this is important to us, and we want this plan to go forward, we can bring you the proposal to go forward. We'll poll different boards and committees and get an idea of what the prioritization is. But after that, to say that there's a separate committee that's then going to put the financing plan together, well, they're just going to draw on the staffing resources of the finance department and the manager's office. And then it's all going to funnel its way up to the selectmen anyway, who decide what ends up on the warrant. So if it's your priority as a board that you want the staff to begin implementing this plan, you don't want it to be a shelf in the plan, you direct that, and then we take the action to make it happen. What you probably saw with the last plan, as Mr. Maloney said, there was not a lot of staff in the planning office, and there really wasn't any interest coming from the selectman's office or from the manager's office. If that has changed, it certainly has in the case of the manager's office, then it becomes, you don't need a separate committee to then prioritize and then implement when it has to go through so many other committees otherwise. I mean, I would envision a system where the planners take the plan, go to conservation, go to planning, go to the selectmen, go to the Sustainability and Trails Commission, get their opinion, get everyone's priorities, put it together in a matrix, the similar way we did with the Complete Streets program a couple months ago. And then you listen up and you say, this appears to be the priority list. Ultimately, what do the selectmen think of that? Yay, nay, move this up, move this down, and then you go forward. I mean, the financing is going to be a $50,000 project, probably going to be CPA. A $400,000 project's probably going to be a free cash allocation. A $4 million land purchase is going to be a larger, more complicated discussion. And it has to weave into our financial picture and our capital planning and everything else that we're doing to really make it happen. So sometimes a committee can be good for implementing things. Sometimes it goes to a committee and then it just kind of dies in committee because folks just spend a lot of time going to different boards and committees. You got to think about the staff support to that committee. Folks are going to have to take notes. Folks are going to have to post the meeting. We're going to have to follow the open meeting law, although you could establish it as an advisory committee and possibly avoid that tactic. So we have more professional planning staff than we did before, and you have an interest certainly in the manager's office in implementing and putting the plan forward. We just appointed 3 new members to the Conservation Commission who have fantastic backgrounds in this area. I think if the staff or if the board wanted to go in that direction, you'd see a robust approach to it. But ultimately, the buck stops with the selectmen who have to decide this is a priority for the manager and his staff, and then we go ahead and make that a priority.
Thank you, Mr. Mizuko. A follow-up to that. No, I appreciate it. If we decide not to form a committee tonight, is there anything that prevents us from forming a committee down the road if we feel like we're not making progress on these the goals?
No, not at all. You could do it at any time. And what you may find is that specific projects, you may want a committee or a task force or a subgroup, depending on the nature of the project. A very small, so something like a pocket park may not be a big project. We're talking a large acquisition, property acquisition. You may want a committee of 10 or 15 or 20 just to work on that specific project, depending on the size and complexity.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. John, I see your hand, sir.
Yeah, yes. Mr. Tony, I think you're making a mountain out of a molehill. When committees are formed, you know, when you want a committee, it's sort of, you know, packaged nice and neat, and then you don't make a big deal because they might have to go before different boards. Nowhere in this proposal does it talk about this committee going before any board to get any approvals. The purpose of this, in what we've been missing, is a group of citizenry, along with the paid staff, getting together and prioritizing a plan that wasn't prioritized and making recommendations to the board, who would then approve it and assign it to whomever to say, okay, let's work on this project first. I see nothing wrong with that. It doesn't have to wait, and they're not getting involved in day-to-day operations. So this is a very simple task, taking a plan that the citizens help develop, and then say, okay, let's take it one step further, prioritize it, make recommendations to the board for different types of projects that are in the plan, because there are different programs within that plan, and bring it forward. It's not that big of a deal.
I mean, you
doesn't have to wait for anything.
Sure, you could certainly have a committee that gets together for 4 or 5 weeks and comes up with a priority list and then sort of dissolves. Because ultimately, if you're looking at who's going to advocate for these projects, the selectmen need to advocate for them if they want them to move forward. If the selectmen don't want to advocate for them, that's a tough bar to cross. So then it comes, you can certainly put a committee together for 5 or 6 weeks worth of work. It's ultimately your call. I was just responding to Mr. Maloney and Mr. Lane on their questions.
You done, Mr. John?
Yes.
Mr. Maloney?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one thing. I know a couple of times it's been said about, you know, we had a plan, we put it on the shelf and so forth. But keep in mind a couple of things. One is, you know, the last plan was issued in the midst of, or just at the end of a recession, where we didn't have a whole lot of money to talk about purchasing property and making investments of this kind. And without benefit of any committee of this kind, we did put together and implement a pretty ambitious plan for the renovations of our fields. We concentrated less on conservation and more on recreation. Those are the two sort of wings of the open space program. We actually did do quite a bit. And again, we didn't need this committee. In fact, we didn't have any of these committees I listed a while ago. But when we wanted something done, we got citizens together and we put it together under the direction of professionals like Joe McDonough and Jerry Miller. So I mean, I just think that, you know, for the sake of consistency, for the sake of maintaining proper order and decision making, it's best done if it's handled by the staff. When the staff wants to bring in citizen involvement, or when we do, we can create committees to do that even on an ad hoc basis. It'll get done though, and I think it'll get done right with the people we have in place now. Thank you.
Thank you. You have another comment, Mr. Mizuko?
Just a quick one. In conversations that I've had with the planning staff, I'm sure we'd include some design charrettes or some public input sessions where you'd say, okay, you know, the Conservation Commission is obviously going to think the conservation projects are a priority. Rec staff think it's recs. Other folks maybe in the middle. Absolutely, public input is going to be part of a process. You just have a good old-fashioned couple of public hearings. You do the little thing where you put the dots on the wall and everyone lists up their priority. I mean, we'll have to come up with a different system now in the world being digital, but any good planning process, and is typical of planning processes, you would include that as part of it.
Okay. Mr. Donahue?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Move that we support Mr. Hajar's motion.
As he made it or as you wanted to amend it?
Motion to create the committee as he originally planned.
Okay. And Mr. Jar, I'm sure you're seconding that?
I'll second it.
Okay. So, I haven't spoken. As I said, I started off accepting that Mr. Halkiotis had talked about setting up a committee and we should do that. I liked, the makeup that Mr. Jar is recommending tonight if we are to have a committee. I think that would represent well and be a workable number. But hearing the comments the last couple of days and just now in this discussion, I think it might be better left to an in-house team, the selectmen as the implementers and prioritizers, having staff work on this. I think the staff is more equipped to do the prioritizing because the plan itself lays out where we're going, what we're looking to do. As far as prioritizing, it's going to be knowing about funding, sources of funding, how they match up to each other and other needs of the community, which ones might be complicated to implement and which ones might be easily implemented. And I think the staff would be more in line with that. Mr. Mizuko, Mr. Halkiotis, our new conservation planner, Mrs. Farley down at the Recreation Department. Actually, if we think about it, those are people we're talking about being on the committee anyhow. And I think it's a lot more nimble and easier to operate as an administrative type of task force than it is a citizen or selectman type of committee. So, any other, Mr. Lane?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is it possible, if this weren't to pass this evening, the formation of the committee, to propose some standard or some measure wherein, if we say in 6 months, if you know the progress hasn't been made that we'd like to see, that we would form a committee or bring it up again? Is that something that we could do?
Yes, we can always reevaluate and reassess what anything we're doing is, including this, is how it's performing and whether we need to make any adjustments.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? We'll put it to a vote then. On the motion to appoint the committee of 5 as recommended by Mr. Hajar. Mr. Hajar?
Aye.
Mrs. Donahue?
Aye.
Mr. Maloney?
No,
Mr. Lane?
No.
And on a close call, I'm going to vote no, so the motion loses 3-2. Is there an alternate motion? Instead of just assuming what our discussion said, it's a motion to turn it over to the manager to establish a task force and to follow through on the plan, knowing that it's a priority of the selectmen to do so. Something along those lines. Anyone have a motion? Mr. Maloney?
so moved.
Okay. Mr. Lane, do you second that?
Seconded.
Okay. On the motion, anything further on that? Mr. Hajar?
I'm still trying to understand the motion.
Motion is to, let me try to reword that a little better. To state the selectmen's acceptance, which we already did, of the open space recreation master plan, and to identify it as a priority of the board and to turn it over to the manager and his staff to set up a task force for implementation.
Mr. Chair?
Mrs. Donahue?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Isn't it procedurally proper if you step aside as chair and appoint someone else as chair while you make the motion?
I asked if there was someone who wanted to make a motion because I thought we needed a positive motion. And then I was just trying to give a general idea of what we were talking about earlier. I'm not making the motion.
Oh, who's making the motion?
I'm asking if there is anyone to make that, any similar motion to that. Mr. Maloney?
Well, I think I did, although I'm not, I probably won't vote for it. I think we should just send the thing to Mr. Mizuko down the hall to planning. Let's see how they do. We'll confer with them on the next several months and just leave it at that. That's what I would do. But if you want to call it a task force, that we can do.
Well, you don't need to use the word task force, but I think we should take a positive indication that the board wants something done or doesn't want something done in this matter.
All right, so I'll move.
Okay, how about if I make a motion that we convey this board's wish to the general manager, who will relay it to the Department of Planning and Community Development, that the Board of Selectmen is serious about moving on open space proposals and prioritization and planning, and I ask for a second.
Okay,
Well, I'd like to amend the motion. I want to be specific about what we're asking, Mr. Chairman. So
Wait a minute.
I'm asking that within 6 months that they come back with a prioritized schedule of what they're recommending and a source of funding by year of how we're going to get these projects completed, or at least recommend where we get the funding and how it's going to be completed, which would be the same thing as what the committee was going to do. So if you want to be Tony, as if they include that, then I'm okay with it, but someone's got to be held accountable. That's all.
would you add those specific conditions to the direction given by the board to Mr. Mizuko, Mr. Maloney?
I'll be happy to do that, Mr. Chairman. I'll ask for a second, and I would like to speak on it. Mr. Hajar, will you?
I'll second.
Second.
Oh, okay.
Okay, Mr. Maloney.
Okay, just so I understand, and when we talk about prioritization, some of what we're talking about involves the purchasing of property. Isn't that correct? Is that sort of are we talking about what we want to do on
Not
the?
necessarily.
Well, that's what I'm saying, but some of it, not all of it. So we're saying, for example, if we want to do something on the Saint Street lots, we want to know where that falls in our list of priorities. Is that a fair way to look at it, Mr. Hajar, if I get that right?
Yes. Yes.
Because if we're going to talk, I mean, that's fine, but if we're talking about going out and purchasing property or looking for property to purchase, that involves a third party.
No,
That's directly the responsibility of the Board of Selectmen, but they could, like you said, identify a prioritization list of which properties we might want to consider to go after, but they're not no one's doing any negotiation or contacting individuals unless the board authorizes it.
Basically, number one on Mr. Hajar's email as part of the directive to the manager. Is that correct, Mr. Hajar?
Yes.
Okay. And that's your motion, Mr. Maloney? And Mr.
Yes.
Hajar? And Mr. Hajar, you seconded it? Anything further?
Yes, I have.
Then we'll vote. Mr. Hajar?
Aye.
Mrs. Donahue?
I,
Mr. Maloney?
Aye.
Mr. Lane?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, so that motion is unanimously passed. And we'll move on to number 2, appointment of selectmen oversight for the Boston Executive Helicopter Statement Agreement. That's a matter you're going to discuss, Mr. Mizuko?
Just briefly, Mr. Chair, as I informed you, the terms of our settlement agreement, we appoint or I should say the board appoints a person to serve in as the selectmen's oversight. I have been filling that capacity for the last 12 months or so, and we would, the staff have a recommendation that we move that over to Anderson Krieger, our expert aviation firm, on other duties, such as the open space plan.
so moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Hajar?
Aye.
Mr. Mizuko? Excuse me, Mr. Maloney?
Aye.
Mrs. Donahue?
I,
Mr. Lane?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The motion is passed unanimously. Further update, Mr. Manager?
Yes, just 2 items for the board, and then I'd be happy to answer any questions the board has. The police department did receive a $46,000 grant from the state for technology and PPE as it relates to COVID. So kudos to Brooks and his team for receiving that grant. And just an announcement from Kerry McCarthy, our senior director. Oakdale Farms will be holding a pop-up farmers market in the senior center parking lot on Monday, August 31st. from 10 a.m. until 1 p.m. The first hour will be dedicated to seniors. The community is also welcome. Oakdale Farms accepts farmers market coupons and SNAP and HIP benefits. They also deliver homes in the Norwood area. They were a vendor at the farmers market, so they may remember them. If you're a senior, and I'll repeat this, if you're a senior and you have not gotten your coupons yet, those are your farmers market coupons, please call Trish Monahan at the Norwood Senior Center, 762-1201. So once again, Oakdale Farms will hold a pop-up farmers market at the Senior Center parking lot, Monday, August 31st, from 10 a.m. until 1 p.m. The first hour is dedicated to seniors. If you have not gotten your farmers markets coupons yet, if you're a senior, I should say, and you have not gotten your farmers market coupons yet, please contact Trish Monahan at the Senior Center, 781-762-1201. And that is all I have, Mr. Chairman.
That's it?
That's
All
all.
right, any other new business, Mr. Lane?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very quickly, Mr. Mizuko, can you just give us an update on how we're doing with early voting and how prepared we are for September 1st? And if Mary Lou or anyone needs help in the office or from volunteers?
So we do always need folks to work as poll workers at the election, so you can contact the clerk's office. We have received thousands of early voting applications and ballots or mail-in ballots. Early voting, I think we had about 70 people over the weekend, and we've been averaging about 40 or 50 a day. It's going on in Memorial Hall at Town Hall. It's going very well. It's a lot of work for the clerk's office. To sort of frame the challenge for everyone to understand what the clerk staff has to do is, if the total voter turnout doesn't actually increase from what it normally is, it's 5 or 6 times the total amount of work for the same number of people to vote. There's a benefit to it, but on election day, both the primary and then on the national election day, the clerk's office has to do actually more work, but the setup is the same, even if 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 people have already mailed in their ballots. We're pleased with the response so far. You can drop your ballots in either of the boxes at Town Hall. We have rearranged the Town Hall parking lot repaving to make sure that this this drop box here at the Town Hall lot stays open through the primary. There's no disruption there. So it's been going very well. I don't believe we need volunteers at this point, other than we do need poll workers. Certainly for the November election, we're always looking for folks who can work the full day. But kudos to Mary Lou and her team. They have been doing, the clerk's office sort of falls under the radar sometimes, but this year COVID has led to as many changes and challenges for the clerk's office as any other department, and they have truly risen to the challenge in an unimaginable election year.
Great, thank you, appreciate it.
Mrs. Donahue?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Mizuko, could you please give us an update on the opening of the town hall?
We're anticipating opening the day after Labor Day, and the staff had a meeting earlier in the week. The recommendation that we're having is folks call ahead for an appointment before they come into town hall, so that we can maintain patron flow and make sure we can best serve everyone. Particularly challenging in an old building like this. Town hall is part public building, part office building. So it's easy to come up with standards for sort of a public building like a bank, where it's very clear you walk into the area where the public go, or an office building that's generally closed to the public. Being a 50-50 and being a 90-year-old building makes it challenging, but we're looking to be open on the day after Labor Day. Please make an appointment and call ahead so we can try to serve you. And just consider the staff and everyone when you do come into town hall. All of our services are available by mail, by appointment, by phone, or online, and we encourage everyone, please continue to utilize those services. The building has very limited capacity for folks to stand, for folks to gather. The distancing that we have to have for folks going into offices, that's why we need sort of an appointment system. So when folks come in, we know that we're not sending too many people to one office at one time, because most of our offices can't get more than a person or two at a time. And we have state health regulations that we have to follow, which limit the number of staff that can be in an office. We have to take some of our meeting space and turn it into workspace so that we can fit all of our staff in the building, given the COVID restrictions that the Department of Health has, not just our local Department of Health, but the state has for us.
Thank you. Could you also give us an update on how it's going opening up the schools?
If I could duck under my table right now, I would. The school committee and Dr. Thompson and the administration, our teachers, have quite possibly the hardest job they'll ever have in their careers, and certainly the biggest challenge we faced in education in decades. Coming up with a plan, I believe the school committee has voted on a hybrid model, is incredibly, incredibly complex. There's going to be additional funding that's needed for that. The analogy with the schools is they're sort of where municipal government and the health department were 4 or 5 months ago where the state is just changing regulations. Almost daily, new guidance is coming out about how schools need to operate. If we think of the green, yellow, red system that the state has come out with, they sort of released that right after towns have made their decision about how they were going back to school. We could have used that a little bit earlier. So the guidelines continue to change daily. So where we are today, we may not be next week, and that's a particular challenge. Another challenge that we're facing, that every town in Massachusetts and the country is facing, is as folks go back to work, particularly teachers, but it's all of our employees as students go back to school, it's finding a way to take care of children of employees in for the employer, for in the public in general. So we have many children who have elementary, we have many employees who have elementary age children, and the town is working on a program to try to take care of our workforce and provide some sort of childcare so our essential employees can actually work. Because if they're not able to, and they choose to take their time under the federal Families First Corona Act, we could see 40, 50, 60 employees who don't report to work. They're allowed to take time because they have to take care of their family. They receive 60% of their pay. They're eligible to use their sick time for the balance of it. We could never absorb sort of a workforce loss of that. The schools would never be able to find that many substitute and per diem and part-time teachers. If we lost 5 or 6 people in certain operating departments, we would have some serious challenges actually delivering services to the public. So things were challenging March, April, and then they eased up a little bit into May, but now we're getting back into that crunch where we need to find a way for our employees to be able to get to work so that we can continue to provide folks. I don't know how this is all going to be worked out in 3 weeks. I can't speculate what the state's going to do. I think the 10-day delay to the start of the school year was wise. If I was the governor, and I'm certainly not, and I don't know what factors he has, I might order another delay to the start of the school year, because implementing everything that has to be done by the middle of September is a Herculean task. And I wish there was something we could just go and do to help the school department out, but they've just got an impossible task among them. And then concerns about whether or not we're going to even have a workforce to deliver services in mid-September is what's keeping me up at nights.
I think that there's a tremendous amount of work that has to be done yet in that respect. So that's a lot. Next question, please. Could you give us an update on the hospital?
Yes, the hospital, in a sense, there's not much of an update. They're still going through their damage assessment process. I believe just this week they received from their engineers their full damage report on the hospital. So that's been concluded. The next step is they need to secure, of course, what they're going to get from insurance. They are looking forward to hopefully zoning changes at a fall town meeting, so that way they can put together their full plan for a reconstruction of the hospital. They are still looking at largely a full reconstruction of the hospital. They're hopeful that the ER will be open in the fall. The challenge they keep running into is all the different components that were damaged that need to be replaced, even on a temporary basis, for the ER and portions of the hospital start opening up. It's sort of, again, similar to what the schools are doing. It's fitting square pegs into round holes, and it becomes a challenge of how much do you do to get one section up, but then you've got to start working on the other sections of the building. Meetings that I've had with hospital leadership, they continue to say that and I think they're going to be putting some signage up to this effect. Their goal is a new facility. The facility suffered millions of dollars worth of damage, tens of millions of dollars worth of damage. As they peeled back more and more layers, the damage was even worse than anyone anticipated. And of course, rebuilding, it's a hospital, so that standard needs to be much higher than maybe a basement in a shop where you might say, well, we dried it out and it's good to go. Obviously, a hospital where they're conducting surgery and emergency services needs to be built or rebuilt to a different standard. So we're still in for some challenging over the next few months, but I still believe that at the end of the day, we're going to see a brand new hospital in 2 to 3 years.
But nevertheless, when the bad weather occurred, it was stated by the hospital that 4 to 6 weeks, the emergency room would be reopened, and the old buildings weren't hurt as badly as the newer building. So
there would be damage to the system.
Excuse me. We would try and ask the hospital about getting the emergency room reopened, because for the town of Norwood, the residents and the fire department, the ambulances, traipsing all around the Commonwealth, that's a great strain on everyone. And they said that it's going to take years for the new hospital to be built, because they've got to go through zoning, they've got to go through engineering, they've got to go through construction. That's about 3 years, would you say? So we can't be without an emergency room for 3 years.
So nobody said that we would be without an emergency room for 3 years. As they've continued to open up the building, as you know, if your basement floods, and a lot of people had that, and you notice damage, as you begin to open things up, you tend to notice more damage. Engineers and insurance companies and our own inspectors will not certify a building's systems unless they're safe. So it does come to safety. Parts of the building were not damaged, but the entire HVAC and mechanical system for the whole building is shot. The building suffered massive, massive damage. It wasn't just the flooding on the side of the building. They had flooding that came in through the courtyard that ended up getting into the HVAC system and shotting the system. You can't get those things reinsured, and inspectors won't sign off on them when there's been damage to the system. So I don't think that they're delaying any opening. It's a building that suffered tens of millions of dollars worth of damage.
I don't mean the LaRusso building. I'm talking about the Draper building and the other building weren't damaged as badly. And that's where the unit was going to be relocated.
Well, Mrs. Donahue, I would be more than happy to connect you with hospital leadership so you can let them know that they should follow that recommendation.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Hajar.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tony, just to follow up on the, I know it's devastating at the hospital, so we have to be patient. I know that, and they'll come to us with the plan. Has anybody identified any infrastructure issues from a town aspect around that hospital that would have to be improved? Or are we okay and it's more internal design issues that they're gonna have to confront with the new hospital?
It's more internal design issues. We do have an easement for some sewer that runs across there, and we've talked with them about rearranging the electricity to bring in 2 different redundant feeds in a different manner than we do now when they rebuild, but it's not really the town infrastructure. I guess one analogy is if you have a 3-story home and your basement floods, so you have damage to the basement, but what also flooded was your entire heating system, and you had gray water go into your plumbing system and into your HVAC system or your air conditioning. So that's why the systems of the building suffered damage and suffered infiltration. That's why it's causing so much damage. Our infrastructure seems to be pretty good to the site. A total reconstruction of the site, there may be a need for more water or sewer. That would be a great MassWorks grant program through the state. If we needed to do anything, we're willing to do whatever we can do to help the hospital. But a lot of it's just the building suffered, the building systems suffered massive damage.
Thank you. Can you give us, I know you're probably sick of it, but Dean Street update, I mean, at least are we still on schedule for the date that was talked about?
Yes, knock on wood, but we are still on schedule. So I think we're 9 weeks out or 8 weeks out from construction. The biggest fear is sort of that first 20-25% when you kind of rip everything up and you open it up. And that is, you know, Mr. Hajar, that's when you say, uh-oh, what's in there that we didn't realize? Well, luckily that first uh-oh phase, everything looked good. So the project is proceeding according to its schedule. So we're still on schedule, on time with that project and on budget as well. Things could always develop down the road, but that first, when you rip out the old culvert and then you see what couldn't we see before, the initial passes, things look good on Dean Street. We know that the traffic is a challenge and there's some road work going on there as well. It will be done in about 8 weeks, 8 to 9 weeks, and we appreciate everyone sticking with us through it. And it will not, the culvert that they're installing is estimated to last 60 years. So hopefully none of us will have to deal with it again.
That's good. And how are we doing around town on roadway and sidewalk work?
Well, as somebody who drives parts of Nickel Street every day, they've got it torn up and they're continuing to work. So we're rolling out with our repaving plan, and we actually have some work going on near Dean Street. So I think we're on pace, and we're on pace on our road paving. The parking lots, we should be finalizing top layer coats in the next week or so at the Day Street and the Talbot's lot. We're also finishing the granite curbing is taking a little bit of time. And the theater lot is actually up next. Originally, it was going to be the town hall lot and the town hall annex lot. We swapped that out with the theater lot to make sure there was no disruption to the drop box through the through the September primary election.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mrs. Donahue?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Rizzuto, the easement in regard to the hospital, when the town sold the civic property to the hospital, I think that easement was put in because there was talk at town meeting that people might want to walk from different parts of the town to the train station. And I trust town meeting in its wisdom that we have the right to move that easement. And we want to cooperate with the hospital. We want them to build a better facility, and whatever we need to help them build a better facility. If they bring that up to town meeting, it would seem the town meeting would be willing to, it would want to help and move that easement.
Absolutely. We think it's a sewer easement, but we're digging through, the hospital will ultimately, pull that up, but that's a good, good historical context.
Right.
Mr. Maloney. Oh, you're off.
You're muted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Do we have any idea of, we talked about anything about the special town meetings this fall? Do we want to begin that conversation?
No, we did administratively. Mrs. Mulvihill brought it up, and I had a very brief discussion with the manager yesterday. We originally had been having some discussions about in October. Seems like some of the information we need to get before we take any positive action at town meeting is a little delayed. So it's probably going to be late September, October, early November, and we still have a few weeks before we have to worry about setting things up.
Okay. Mr. Mizuko, I know it's early, but do we have any feel for free cash certification?
So the early look is we think it will be positive, which is good because we know we have our capital projects. We know we have probably a budget offset because we don't know what's going on with state aid. If the school's moving forward with the hybrid model, will cost additional money. That'll sort of be a 1-year cost. The initial look, and again, sometimes you put the wrong number in a spreadsheet somewhere, looks positive on free cash, and we'll have enough to get us through and have enough going into next year and possibly do some fund balances. Remembering that we didn't spend our free cash last year. So that's one of the reasons we think the number might be much higher than average. We've also been taking, steps over several budget cycles to try to make sure we're generating enough free cash. But initial look is good.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anything else? Mrs. Donahue?
Thank you. You mean, is this before the meeting ends? Comments?
Yep.
Okay. I'd like to take a minute and talk about Peter Wall. So he coached baseball here in Norwood for 35 years, and he also helped a lot of other people around town in many wonderful ways. And his brother Joe was a member of the Board of Selectmen in the 60s. His brother Frank was a newspaper reporter, and in each holiday season, he'd write an article. Frank Wall would write an article about all the former athletes in the town, and he'd give an update on how the former athletes were doing. And there was always some talk around town about how accurate the article was, but he made everybody superstars, which was a positive thing. And Pete did a great job helping, and he lived up on Morse Hill, and I'm very sorry that he passed on to his family. Thank you.
Thank you. His brother, Joe, on the board, he served until his untimely passing on 1978, and I took his seat and moved on from there. So I just want to remind people, I think we did some discussion of it earlier, that the early voting is still continuing. It's in Memorial Hall here at Town Hall at the corner of Washington and Manhattan Street. It's 8:30 in the morning to 3:30 at night. You've got 3 days left. It'll be Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. All early voting ceases at 3:30 Friday afternoon. I also would like to take a moment to make a personal statement. Last night at the League of Women Voters Forum, between the candidates for state rep and the September 1st primary, Democratic primary, the incumbent, Mr. Rogers, made several statements, derogatory statements about my character. I want to take exception, but I will not get into detailed response because I feel it would be unfair to do so, but he would not have time to respond before next week's election. But I take great exception to his comments. One that I have to answer, as he talked about me funding his opponent's campaign with dark money, which is very much trying to put a negative connotation of my activities in the minds of the people of Norwood. I have made a contribution to his opponent, $250 by check and fully reported. Anyone can look it up. And so it's covered by all the campaign laws and everything is up and up. $250 is not enough to fund and finance and bankroll, as he said, a candidate for state representative. And in the form that that contribution was made, it's anything but dark money. It's me using my constitutional right to support who I want to support and the way I want to support them, as it is every other member of this community, this state, and this country. Also, he mentioned one other item that kind of reflects on, he mentioned me, but it really reflects on the entire board, a matter that's been kicked around town a lot and not discussed much from our end, and I'd like to make some points about it. He mentioned the Skating Club of Boston and the town. Again, he criticized me for wanting to get them a liquor license. I want to explain a little bit about that liquor license and the reasons for seeking that liquor license. The Board of Selectmen first started meeting with the skating club in 2014 or 15, and General Manager Carroll at the time asked the skating club if they might be willing to make a pilot agreement with the town, which is a payment in lieu of taxes, because they are 100% exempt from paying taxes, and a pilot is 100% voluntary. At that time, the agreement has taken pilot has taken many different turns, but at that time, what the Skating Club of Boston was going to give the town of Norwood was $125,000 to buy a Zamboni and other items they might need to equip their ice rink, which we were trying to get, which Representative Rogers had promised money for. And if it was built, we'd have some money to start buying some of that equipment. It was also conditioned that if that skating rink was never built, those funds would be returned. At that time, we also offered to seek a special license because they had inquired about liquor licenses, and there were none available in the marketplace at that time. The Selectmen saw many benefits to supporting the skating club coming to town, which I'll get into in a moment. But the idea of a special license was something we had done when we supported other business and thought they brought benefits to the community. We did that for the Norwood Theater. We did that for the Grassroots Organization. We did that for Bibbo's Restaurant, Norwood Center, and others. So it wasn't anything unusual. It was something that we found proper for businesses that would be giving advantages back to the community. The pilot, or the benefits that we see is having such a prestigious organization located in the town, where they will be bringing people from across the country and indeed across the world to our borders. They will be making an investment of approximately $60 million in our town. One of the main reasons they need a liquor license or want a liquor license is because they need to, and that invest they're making, they need to compete against other venues for championship events, for skating events and shows. And to do that and be successful in getting them located here in the town of Norwood, they need a liquor license, or they won't have the same benefits these other venues offer those making the decisions of where to conduct them. The benefits are that they attract many, many people to the area for 3 to 5 day periods. They have one already set up for January, which is a small one just to get themselves started, and they will need 139 hotel rooms for several days. Those people also will be eating in our restaurants, so both the hotels and the restaurants will benefit significantly by a skating club being in town and able to lure those events to our community. And the town benefits also from that same activity, and it will have increased meals taxes and room taxes. Besides that, the Skating Club of Boston is going to offer many jobs, part-time jobs in particular, to our youth and others in town. They're going to be a major or a significant employer, again, particularly of our youth. The Skating Club is also voluntarily making a payment, as I said, 100% voluntarily. And at this time, some of the benefits that the community will receive $99,000 in cash payment with a 3% annual increase. And they will have made agreement with very cooperative members of the Norwood High School athletic director, and Mr. Tolman in particular. And they have ice time for home ice in Norwood that they have never had in the history of the town. They have that at a very, very favorable rate. They met with the skating club officials and asked above and beyond what they had already agreed to in a pilot agreement at their own expense to use the town's colors on the rink, to paint the town's Mustang logo, which was just done yesterday, the day before, at center ice, to provide an area of wall space so that the history of Norwood High hockey can be displayed. And as you enter that facility to watch those games, the kids will be so proud. It says home of the Mustangs. And they've also wired the facility so that our community media can broadcast home games live from that venue. They've also agreed to give several scholarships, 10 scholarships for several different programs, training programs that they conduct in and around their main business, which is figure skating, training Olympic stars, and so forth. So scholarships for our Norwood residents. They've also given Norwood residents a discounted rate for open ice skating time for those who want to go down and do free skating. They've also offered deep discounts to Norwood residents who might want to be more involved and buy memberships into the club. So they're giving back much to the community that, particularly the economic engine part to our businesses that would benefit a spin-off from the club. And we thought that was very most worthy of our supporting getting them a liquor license, whether it be by special license, which not only does the selectmen support, but town meeting unanimously, and or purchase, which they eventually are in the process of purchasing because we're not successful in getting the state to pass that special license. And they bought trying to buy a license from the Bamboo Restaurant, which unfortunately had to close its doors. They have significant debt to pay. They're looking for the sale to go through. Unfortunately, it's being held up, but hopefully we get that cleared soon. But I just wanted to kind of go over some of those benefits that people may not be aware of that the town will be receiving for the skating club being here, and if it has a license, a liquor license, so that it can bring those kinds of crowds to Norwood and the offshoot revenue spin-off economy benefits. With that, if there's nothing further, take a motion to adjourn. Mr. Maloney?
Just very quickly, Mr. Chairman, I've been riding sidecar with you on this matter for 3 years. You are 200% correct about the benefits that will accrue to the town as a result of the Skating Club of Boston coming to Norwood. Your personal comportment on this has been impeccable. I think it's, one of the things that you and I have agreed to over the years repeatedly is a chief function of a selectman is to be ambassador to the town and to promote economic development. This is a great boon to the town. I was out socially with someone from NCM recently. They are over the moon over the great treatment they're getting from the Skating Club of Boston. They are so happy. Ditto the people involved in the Norwood High School hockey program. They're absolutely over the moon. As you said, I have a photograph somebody just sent me as we've been talking about the Mustang logo at Center Ice. This thing is a great boon. It's going to be good for the people of the town. It's going to be good for the region. It's a great economic engine. It's why we do this as selectmen. I think this board and you in particular have handled it quite well. I can't wait for that place to open. They got that liquor license, and they're going to be here for decades to come, making a lot of people happy in this area. I want to congratulate you on the great work you've done on this project so far, and I look forward to its culmination. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Maloney. Mr. Jar?
Yes, I do want to pile on because I think this town has done a great service by getting the Skating Club of Boston to come to Norwood in the fashion that has come, and all the promises that they have made and have come through on virtually them all. And I think Representative Rogers should be working with the town, not against the town. He has chose a different path. It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that he has made negative comments, because this is going to be great for the town of Norwood, even for surrounding towns that have restaurants, because a lot of people are going to be here going out. Hang your head high for all the work you've done in this matter. It's well deserved. I'm sorry that you had to take those comments. It truly is unfair, and you have the backing of all your fellow board members in this matter. I know it. For him to be doing that is just unconscionable, considering he's supposed to be working with us, and he's not.
Mrs. Dunn, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jar. Mrs. Donahue?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the history of the town, Mr. Plasko, you have been one of the most devoted people to town government and to the town of Norwood that I've ever known. You started off, how old were you when you started helping the town? Were you town moderator first job?
Town moderator, 22.
22 years old.
23.
And here you are, 39 years old now, and you've helped out your whole life.
He
And
was born 39.
Don't worry about any comments that were made, because anybody who has a brain knows how you are probably the most loyal son the town of Norwood has ever had. And you've devoted your whole life to it. And so don't you worry a bit, because you're really, nothing can bother you, Mr. Plasko. You're a wonderful person.
Thank you for your kind comments. I wasn't really trying to solicit them, just get a few things off my chest and speak to the town's benefits of the skating club, but I do appreciate those kind comments. If we're all set, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All
Second.
in favor? All opposed? Mr. Jar?
Aye.
Mrs. Donahue?
Aye.
Mr. Maloney?
Aye.
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Thank you all very much. We'll stand adjourned and see you next week. Then we'll be taking the following week off. And the week following that, we will be meeting on the 15th, I believe. And that meeting is going to be in person at the police station, as we have a public hearing to conduct that evening. Thank you all very much.